All right, continuing on here, we're going to get our slideshow working. It's going to be a CSS animated transitioning slideshow. So the first thing I want to do is under photography, I want to create a new div tag, and this one I'm going to call it slideshow, or I'm going to say that the class is the slideshow. And in here I'm going to add some images. And we're going to start with just 2 images, and we'll add more after that. So I'm going to show you how to do 2, and then from there you can add as many as you want. So in my photography folder, underneath images, I have 2, I actually have several images, but we're going to go with 1 and 2 for now. And we're going to refresh our page here, hop down to photography. And so I'm going to be transitioning between these 2 photographs. And right now they look a little funky, so I'm going to give them a little bit of styling, of course. And so I'm going to start off with slideshow image tags, and I'm going to make these framed. And so I'm going to give them a nice thick border. That looks pretty good, but because we're professionals, we're going to add in also a nice rounded border. So using the border radius. This is a CSS3 thing. So I'm going to give it a 20 pixel radius. And now we're looking super good. Alright, so now let's see if we can get these to be overlapping each other. And so to accomplish this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these figures. So back in our HTML, I'm going to make this a figure, and I'm going to call this slide 1. So I'm just going to wrap that in a figure tag. And likewise, I'm going to make this with the ID figure 2, or sorry, slide number 2. Okay. And now over here in my slideshow, I can add a figure option. And what I want to do with my figure option is I want to make these absolute, because I want them to be overlapping. And so if we do that, they're overlapping, but now you notice they're a little bit to the side, a little bit funky. So what we want to do is we want to actually do some more style changes to get this working the way we want it to. So I'm going to make it so the width on these guys is 100%. And so that's going to be 100% of the container they're in, which happens to be the slideshow. And we also need to make it so that the slideshow class overall has a relative positioning. And I know the height of these pictures is 550. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. And we want, so I'll refresh just so you can see what that did. So now you see we're a little bit to the right, which is not quite what we want. So what we want to do, the problem that's happening is we have a margin issue. So we're going to just set the margin, say this has no margin, it's absolute, and there we go. Now we have this nice centered photograph. Alright, and we want these to switch between each other. So we're going to do that using a CSS animation. And what we're going to do first is these things need to be fading in and out. So by default, we're going to just have them be invisible. And you can do this using opacity 0. So if I refresh now, you can't see them. They have no opacity. And what we're going to do is specifically for each one of these slides, so slide 1, notice I'm using the hash here. Again, very similar to what we did before with the links. We hash design, graphic design here. It specifically looks for something with the ID graphic design. And so it works the same in our style sheet. Hash slide number 1 is going to look for the ID. So this happens to be the figure with the ID slide 1. And so you can style specifically ID'd things rather than using a class. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the animation feature. And we're going to create an animation called crossfade or X-fade. I'm going to have this animation last 5 seconds. So each frame is going to show up for exactly 2.5 seconds. I want the first slide to show up immediately at 0 seconds. And I want it to loop through fading forever. So I'm going to say infinite. I'm going to do something similar with slide number 2. Again, we're going to have an animation called crossfade. It's going to be a 5-second animation, but this one's going to start after 2.5 seconds. So halfway through, so you'll see the first slide number 1, and then after 2.5 seconds, you'll see slide number 2. And now we need to create our animation. And so to do this, we're going to use our keyframes from CSS3. We're going to call it crossfade or xfade. At 0%, we're going to have the opacity be 0. So initially it's completely invisible. Then we're going to have a nice smooth transition. So after 10% of the time has passed, we want the graphic to show up. So we're going to have opacity 1. Then after 50% of the time, so we want this thing visible for the full half. Since we have 2 images, we want it visible for 50% of the time, each one of these. So we're going to do 1 here as well. And then we want it to fade out. And so fade out as quickly as it faded in. So I'm going to do 60%. Just like we have 0% to 10%, we have 50% to 60%. And we're going to have the opacity be back to 0. Alright, so let's see what effect we have here. So you see, photograph faded in nicely. We transition after 2.5 seconds, and then it goes back. So it infinitely loops these. Alright, so let's see what it takes to add in additional images. So let's hop back over to our page here. I'm just going to copy this and create 2 more slides. So slide 3, slide 4, and likewise the 3 and 4 in our photography directory. And then back in the style sheet. So if we reload this now, we're just going to have the same fade because we haven't added these to our style sheet. But all we have to do now, so we have 2 more slides. So we want our animation is now going to take a total of 10 seconds rather than 5 seconds, because each one of these is going to show up for 2.5 seconds. And we need to set our delay to be in increments of 2.5 seconds. So slide number 3 is going to show up at the 5-second mark. And slide number 4 is going to show up at the 7.5-second mark. Additionally, we have now, rather than showing up or lasting 50% of the time, we want these to be visible for 25% of the time. Since there's 4 images, we want them evenly spaced 25%. And just for consistency, I'm going to reduce this to 5% since we doubled, and reduce this to 30% so that this isn't fading out for a very long time. Alright, let's reload. And so we get our first image. We get a nice transition to our deer image. Now we have a nice island. And finally this cool looking building. And then it loops back around. So you can add as many images as you want, but you got to remember that since we're doing this in pure CSS, the animations just need to be offset by the amount that you want them to be visible. And the amount of time that we're visible needs to be a percentage that is related to the total number of images you'd like to use. Alright, that's it. We have this nice, beautiful slideshow. Next, I'll show you how to create a thumbnail gallery. Oh, before we continue on, notice we have this, when we scroll down, I almost forgot, I'm glad I went on. You'll notice that this is now showing up over our Creative Solutions top bar. So we do need to fix this. And so this isn't too hard to solve. In fact, all we need to really do is we go over to our top bar, and we're going to use the z-index attribute, and we're going to set our top bar to be on the 1. By default, everything's at 0. So now if we reload, our top bar actually shows up on top of everything. Excellent. Alright, now, in the next section, I'm going to show you how to create a nice thumbnail logos gallery for you to impress your clients with.